Hey, Shalom, Shalom. I'm going to start off this video by giving all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rakah HaKodash, double honors to the apostles and the elder bishops, a great millstone that rule well, that teach well, while learning the truth 100% according to the Bible. I also want to say Shalom to the elect, the 144,000 men, prophet, servants scattered abroad the four corners of the earth. And Shalom to you, Akwaf, which are you sisters that are sincere, your children, Shalom. And in today's video is going to be a quick little news update from the things that are basically taking place in the world. So here it is. You got a video that I got from NY Prepper, and we're going to allow it to play, and, we're going to see what's going on and things of that nature. And I'm going to get a few precepts, and Lord's willing, I pray it be edifying. Just a little quick news update. But with that being said, fair use under 1976 Copyright Act. I'm not getting paid for this video. This is only for educational purposes, only fair use.
What's going on, guys? It's Greg here, aka NY Prepper. It is Sunday, July 20th, 2025, and I have some breaking news to share with you guys. Right now it is 17:10 Eastern Time here in the United States, and we have some major breaking news coming in from Europe and the Middle East and from here in the U.S. So, major breaking news coming in. The U.S. is deploying nuclear bombs in Great Britain, the United Kingdom, for the first time since 2005, with numerous sources reporting that several B-61 Mod 12 thermonuclear gravity bombs were transferred this week from the U.S. Air Force Nuclear Weapons Center at Kirtland Air Force Base in New Mexico.
Right. So we basically just got a gist of what it is that he said from the little bit of the video I played. So basically you got the United States, they're sending nuclear weapons over there to the UK, to Britain. And we know this all comes around the time where you just had Donald Trump basically tell Vladimir Putin that, ultimately he has a certain amount of time, to stop that whole conflict over there in Ukraine. So, we see everything leading up to the third world, man, because that's what all of these situations and scenarios and these wars and rumors of wars that we see occurring is ultimately building up towards. The Battle of Armageddon, man, that it tells you about in Revelation 16, when those nukes are going to be used, man. That's why all of these nations are ultimately, preparing these bombs, man, and getting them ready, moving them around and setting them up in certain places and areas because, they know what's coming, man. It tells you in Proverbs 21:1 that the king's heart, meaning his mind, is in the hands of the Lord. As the rivers of water, he turneth this whithersoever he will. So we know that ultimately these nations are not doing what they want to do on their own accord. They're ultimately being, controlled by Yahweh, by Hashem, Yahweh Shai, man. And this is the spirit that the Lord has on these nations because we're in that season, right? This is Ecclesiastes chapter 3, start at verse 1. To everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under the heaven, right? And I'm going to go straight to the point. Verse 8, it said a time to love and a time to hate, a time of war and a time of peace, right? And we're living in that time of war, man. That's what you see happening here in the world. All of these different scenarios and conflicts where you got all of these different countries that are at enmity and at odds with each other. That's because the Lord has it on their mind to be in this spirit, man, because ultimately he's about to bring forth judgment. We know what the Lord said that he ultimately wants to do with all of these nations that you see preparing for war, right? This is Joel chapter 3, and I'm going to start at verse 2. It says, I also will gather all nations and will bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat, which in Hebrew means Yahweh Shaphat, right? The Heavenly Father's judgment. And will plead with them there for my people and for my heritage Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations and parted my land, right? So ultimately, all of these events are coming together because the Lord is about to judge these heathens for what they've ultimately done unto his people. It tells you about that in Psalms chapter 83, all of those nations that were ultimately confederate against Yasharallah, Israel, the Lord's people, right? Those are the same nations that you ultimately see preparing for war, right? And I'm going to actually go to that Psalms chapter 83, right? Just so we can get a gist of the nations in which it is that we all see preparing for war. Because when you look in the world, these are all of the nations who the Lord is putting the spirit on to prepare for war. Those same nations, right? Because ultimately this is his counsel. This is what he's going to bring forth, via the Third World War. So this is Psalms chapter 83, right? And I'm going to start at I'm going to just start at the point, right? This is verse 3. And And it says, they have taken crafty counsel against thy people and consulted against thy hidden ones. They have said, come and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may no more be in remembrance. For they have consulted together with one consent. They are confederate against thee. And when you go into that word confederate, it basically means to be against. You know, these people set up crafty counsels against the Lord's people, man, and consult on how they're going to destroy us and how they're going to do all of these things. And the Lord is watching all of those things, man. So that's why he ultimately has all of these nations, right? And I'm going to get into the list of nations, right? This is Psalms chapter 83. And I'm going to start at verse 6. It said the tabernacles of Edom, right, which are the so-called white people of the day. You see them preparing for war. You know, Russia and America and Europe and the EU and NATO, all of these different heathen nations, man, they're all preparing for war, right? It said the Ishmaelites, which goes into those musty armpit smelling Arabs over there in the so-called Middle East, they're preparing for war, you know. Moab, which is the so-called Chinese, man, you see them over there preparing to invade and go to war with Taiwan and various other Asian countries right along with America. So, I mean, all of these things are being set up by the Lord, man, right? It said in the Hagarenes, which are those South African countries, you know, the Hamites, they're preparing to go to war as well. The Lord's putting the spirit on them because they're ultimately allied with Russia, which is the BRICS, you know. So ultimately, all of these nations are coming together to prepare to go to war, man. You see? So it says, verse 7, Gabal and Ammon, which Ammon goes into the so-called Japanese people, right? They're preparing for war. You got Japan preparing things and stuff like that. And it says in Amalek, which that goes into those little hats that are over there in the land, those so-called Israelis, right? So these are all of the nations which you ultimately see the Lord having at odds with each other right now. These are the wars, countries that you ultimately see preparing to go to war with one another, right? These same exact countries, right? So it said the Philistines with the inhabitants of Tyre, right? Verse 8, Asher also is joined with them. They have hope in the children of Lot, Salah. So ultimately, all of those different heathen nations that I just listed, those are the ones that ultimately the Lord is putting the spirit on to prepare for war, because we're ultimately about to come into that time. And the Lord is going to drag all of these nations to the so-called Middle East, man. That's what we see everything leading up towards. That's what it's building to, right? So this is Joel chapter 3. And I'm going to start at verse 9. It said, proclaim ye this among the Gentiles, talking about these heathen nations. Prepare war, right? And that's what they're doing. That's why you got the United States moving nuclear missiles towards the, Europe area and things of that nature, because they're preparing for war. And we know ultimately the EU and NATO, they're going to turn their back on America. So those same missiles that America is sending over there, hey, those are going to be the missiles that the Lord are going to, put the spirit on these nations to shoot over here to America. So it's really pointless. But hey, that's the pride of Babylon, man. That's how the Lord is going to bring this place down, right? It says, wake up the mighty men, let all the men of war draw near, let them come up, right? And that's soon about to take place, man, right? When all of these nations ultimately, prepare and, the draft comes and all of those different things and these military soldiers get ready because, hey, we're in that season and time, man, where all of these things are about to begin to manifest, right? So this is verse 10. It said, beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say, I am strong, man. And that's going into all of those nations that I labeled earlier, going into the Ishmaelites, all of those nations that were at once upon a time, they did not possess nuclear capabilities, but now they have nuclear capability. You actually just had Iran send out a threat to America, I believe, last week where they actually said that they will nuke them. So, I mean, like I said, we're in that time, man, where all of these prophecies are about to begin to unfold, So it says, verse 11, assemble yourselves and come all ye heathen and gather yourselves together round about thither. Cause thy mighty ones to come down, O Lord, Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushua, man. Right? Because that's the Lord putting the spirit on these nations to come down there to the Middle East, right? So they can all fight it out. So the Lord can ultimately bring forth judgment upon them, man. Right? So this is verse 12. It said, let the heathen be wakened and come up to the valley of Yahweh Shaphat, for there will I sit to judge all the heathen round about, right? And that's why I brought out that Psalms 83 earlier, because that's ultimately going into why the Lord is going to judge these nations, because ultimately they have touched the apple of his eye, which is his people, man. So that's why these punishments are about to come upon these people, man. Right? That's why the Lord tells us this in this precept right here. I'm going to get that. This is Zephaniah chapter 3, right? And I'm going to start at verse 8, getting straight to the point, right? It says, therefore wait ye upon me, saith the Lord, Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushua, until the day that I rise up to the prey. For my determination is to gather the nations, that I may assemble the kingdoms to pour out upon them mine indignation, even all my fierce anger. For all the earth shall be devoured with the fire of my jealousy. And that's what the Lord is about to do, man, via this third world war. That's what he's about to do, pour out his anger upon these nations, man. Right? So that's what everything is ultimately building up towards, you see? So I'm actually get this precept right here as well. This is Revelations chapter 11, verse 14. And it says, the second woe is past, and behold, the third woe cometh quickly, man. And that's what all of these scenarios are building up towards, man. That's what we see coming. World War III, you know. And it's about to get critical very soon, man, because it's already here. Like I said, we're just at a small stage of it, but it's going to continue to grow and to get intense and worse and worse as time progresses, as the Lord allows these prophecies to ultimately to speed up more quicker. The more we're going to ultimately see these events getting more serious, you know. So I'm going to get back into the video.
To the newly built nuclear weapons storage facility at RAF Lakenheath in Suffolk, England. The B-61 Mod 12 is an advanced, low-yield tactical nuclear gravity bomb that is able to be equipped by a number of aircraft, including the F-35s, which is flown by both the 493rd Fighter Squadron and the 495th Fighter Squadron based at Lakenheath. Now, the B-61 Mod 12 is the latest version of the B-61 nuclear gravity bomb, and it is the most accurate, but with the smallest yield. It has 4 settings of 0.3 kilotons, 1.5 kilotons, 10 kilotons, or 50 kilotons. And the U.S. is currently building the Mod 13, which will feature the same accuracy as the Mod 12, but have a yield of up to 340 kilotons, okay? But we know...
Right. So ultimately, we see why they're doing these things, man, because we know ultimately these weapons of mass destruction, you know, these nuclear missiles that these countries possess, that, you know, ultimately Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushua is going to put the spirit on these nations to use them, man. That's ultimately why the Lord gave this technology to Esau, man. Because the Lord was going to use these weapons in his time to ultimately bring forth his judgment upon America and upon various other countries that these missiles are ultimately going to hit during the Third World War. So I'm actually getting this precept right here. This is Isaiah chapter 54, and I'm going to start at verse 16. It said, behold, I, talking about Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushua, have created the smith, which are the modern day scientists, right, that blow up the coals in the fire, right, because the Lord have ultimately given these men the technology to be able to create these weapons, right? And it says, and that bringeth forth an instrument for his work. And I have created the waster, talking about that ICBM missile, right, to destroy. And that's exactly why these missiles are being moved around. That's exactly why you hear so much talk between these nations about nuclear weapons. Because we're in that time, man, where, you know, the Lord is about to allow these things to be shot off, man, and to be unleashed, you know. So, yeah, you know, that's pretty much everything I had to say with today's video. Lord's willing, I pray it be edifying. Just something quick through the spirit. Like I said, you know, till the next time, I'm going to say shalom.